Bernard de Montreal. Book Beyond the Mind. Chapter 4. Psychic Seduction. The psychic sciences are rapidly gaining interest throughout technologically advanced countries. They are becoming increasingly popular as people from all walks of life are drawn towards often indiscriminate forms of knowledge and experience. While the majority show little awareness of the underlying risks, others are gifted with sufficient critical faculties that act as a protection against presumed truths professed by those who appoint themselves masters in the field. Psychic sciences should not be approached on the basis of simple curiosity or naive spiritual quest. Throughout history, they have been tarnished by the desire for power in one form or another, and as such, are closely associated with disincarnate psychic forces fully removed from the light source of creative human intelligence. The source of most occult sciences conforms to the laws of the hostile or soul world, which is by nature rule and law, anti-man and anti-life. As we are confined by the limitations of gravity, the forces or entities evolving on the astral planes are dominated by laws which they cannot transgress. Above all, it is not, and never was, in their interests to reveal the nature of their subliminal activities or their occult bond with mankind through a conscious or unconscious psychic connection. Had it been otherwise, planetary evolution would have progressed much more rapidly and have been less disgraced by ignorance. Until the advent of modern science, blind contact with those planes had always played an important role in the development and support of myths and superstitions. The cultural and spiritual support of involutionary civilizations, extensively used and manipulated by temporal and spiritual powers at the expense of the intelligence of consciousness. Psychic influences must be unmasked and the study of occult sciences put in proper perspective in order to raise awareness. The development of a solid inner maturity and critical mind is necessary to prevent damaging consequences throughout life. Astral entities move and evolve on planes of energy that connect with the human astral field through overt or covert forms of mediumnity. Classical psychology is not focused on the difficult and subtle cases of astral domination and the soul-searching individual, in general, remains too naive and unintelligently spiritual a being to deal objectively with insidious forces that can manipulate the mind to an extent that boggles the imagination. Psychic disorientation is on the increase in a world where social forces are reducing life to an exhaustive drive for success at any price. Those who, through inner research or experience, seek meaning to life, must do so in a manner that stems from intelligent study and careful assessment. Understanding the mechanics of the mind brings liberation from the heavy onslaught of astral influences that accompany the opening of psychic channels and can extend to a scourge of insidious subliminal mind possession. A great number of sensitive individuals have extraordinary potential but fail to integrate their psychic perceptions on a truly individualized basis. They do not understand that the mind is manipulated by astral forces working undercover using mystifying elements to thwart life's creative potential. A great many people do not realize their lifelong dreams because of their incapacity to transmute psychic stress into the powerful drive of the conscious mind. The media has brought to public attention the degrading social phenomenon of the street people. An increasingly disturbing number of individuals in advanced stages of social and personal distress roam the ghettos of modern cities. Many display the peculiar obsession of talking to themselves. They are victims of subtle inner psychic manipulation that gnaws away at their already weakened will. They suffer from unconscious psychic communication with low astral entities that exert a high degree of influence on their minds. They are caught in a psychic trap from which they cannot escape for lack of understanding of a menacing spiritual phenomenon. Their personal development and their participation in the modern social process has been thwarted. They have become outcasts to an extent that recalls the victims of leprosy in times past, and their population may swell to unmanageable numbers in the next generations unless drastic measures are taken. As modern life diminishes in quality, more distraught individuals will end up as street people and cease to be functional citizens because of their incapacity to understand the subliminal psychic domination to which they have become victims. Street people are the remnants of a race that has lost touch with its identity. They will be rejected because of our inherent unwillingness or fear to study the deeper aspects of the mind, which threaten a fundamental view of reality. Present psychological parameters are not sufficient to study the astral onslaught which attacks the weakened members of a race whose social structures are becoming increasingly vulnerable to the nefarious forces of the unconscious mind. People who talk to themselves obsessively will tell anyone interested in listening that they are entertaining an inner conversation with an entity or many entities with whom they relate to, for better or for worse. The entities, identified by name or some other form of symbol, are able to magnetize them through thought, leading them eventually to total loss of identity. Street people are a good example of individuals who have been sucked into an unidentified psychic vortex. Their mental territory has been invaded by entities or lower intelligences who feed on their misery and will do anything to increase their level of suffering, which is directly proportional to the psychic domination they are able to impose. The new waves of crime that regularly shock public sensitivity indicate a form of behavior intimately connected with the inner voice phenomenon. Many perpetrators of heinous crimes have divulged to their psychiatrist that, prior to committing a crime, and before being placed under the insanity rule, they had heard a voice or many voices commanding them to commit the crimes. The real cause of their crimes must be seen in their inability to see through the distortion and Machiavellian manipulation of their mind by entities that operate from an unknown vantage point behind the veil of egoic consciousness. Such crimes can evolve indefinitely on the scale of social horrors to a point that would befit cinematographic proportions. The drug culture is one of the great inductions to the opening of psychic centers that lead to the domination of the mind. Many of today's crimes are directly linked to drug consumption that is taking modern societies hostage. Obsessive behavior is a symptom of those dominated by forces that dwell behind the screen of self-centered egoism. As astral forces grow in strength, the inner life of the individual becomes unbalanced by their debilitating effect that can turn human consciousness into an astral channel acting against man and race. The world of the mind remains a vast unknown. And those who claim contact with higher dimensions do not necessarily understand the profound responsibility they take on when working with or serving forces or intelligences whose teachings are taken for granted due to lack of an independent creative mind. Total discernment can only be achieved through the difficult but necessary integration of one's own energy. Mediumnity is part of soul, or karmic, experience unless it falls under the full control of a highly integrated personality. Identity must be maintained at all cost when dealing with psychic communication from other planes. Until the occult nature and function of those contacts can be individually and personally evaluated, mediumnity remains a soul-serving experience. Those who become enthralled with psychic sciences risk psychic induction and mental domination. Once the psyche has been sufficiently magnetized, its forces can grow beyond the individual's control. The reality of the mind is not measurable by the unconscious intellect. This requires profound changes in the mechanics of consciousness and a full understanding of the psychic laws that underlie the systemic organization of the astral world. The astral plane is a continuum of consciousness whose unwritten law is to lead the individual away from himself by creating and maintaining the illusion of the psychic ascendancy of the ego. Man's curious and limited nature is one that believes and accepts, unwittingly, messages from beyond. He has been for so long estranged from himself that contact with other levels appears, at first, as the epitome of mental and psychic freedom from insipid rational knowledge. The illusion is propagated by his willingness to believe. And this prerequisite is the price paid for his infatuation with entities that use his mind. Disenchantment with the values of modern life and the lack of satisfying answers lead many upon unfamiliar, alienating paths. Those who hold an interest in occult sciences should be made aware of the potential quandary that lies ahead. Should they pursue the study of mind sciences that defy rational ideas about existence and its underground? The mind is open to all kinds of influences, some more pernicious than others. The psyche is naturally predisposed to fascination and curiosity. Fascination for the occult is the beginning of a psychic awareness that results in the systematic weakening of the ego through the estrangement of the personality. Occult sciences condition the mind to subliminal influences of astral origin, and dissociate it from the values of day-to-day living. Those forces breed and grow on the human psyche through the manipulation of thoughts and ideas which in themselves are part of a subtle psychic game unknown to the unconscious ego. The study of the occult is not in itself dangerous. Ignorance of the occult astral underground and its laws is the real threat. Sowing the seeds of potential instability in a mind lacking the necessary maturity to maintain a much-needed balance between occult interests and daily existence. The study of the occult demands a creative consonance of the mind to ideas and concepts that usually bewitch the ego with notions that tend to shift its attention away from the drudgery of life. Those who seek comfort in the study of the occult must do so on the basis of an objectively critical awareness rather than a desire to evade the mindlessness of the modern world. Otherwise, the study of such sciences may well lead to a form of diversion, a way out of the world, and into a narrow existence. Psychic seduction and occult sciences are intimately related. The occult cannot be taken at face value regardless of its credibility. It is part of the evolution of the mind to see through the veils of so-called revealed truths in order to arrive at an integrated reality. The occult invites the individual to seek further into the realm of the unknown with the help of his intuitive faculties, but its unveiling must precede its conquest if these sciences are to become the ultimate tool in the battle against ignorance. The occult never gives a foolproof understanding of the fundamentals of life and death or other metaphysical meanings. Until the individual grows beyond the illusory astral reflection it creates in the spiritualized ego. Seduction always springs from naivety. Occult sciences do not predispose the student to objectivity. This can only be achieved through the realization that truth is a powerful and self-contained illusion that must be disposed of and replaced by the depolarized nature of the pure mind that knows without falling prey to seduction. The seeker of truth, in one form or another, is faced with the need to identify himself with a spiritual ideology in order to give his life meaning. At this point, seduction takes over the power of the mind and begins to undermine its creative center in a manner that invites the development of the spiritual imagination at the expense of an objective psychic science. Occult spiritual imagination can lead to dangerous and subtle forms of seduction. It can boycott the centricity of the pure mind and deflect from objective understanding as it grows into an overpowering force that dulls the critical faculties of the ego. At this point, the ego loses its capacity to see through the astral light that threatens to imprison it within a form of thought that deprives it from contact with the higher mental levels of the real self. Spiritual imagination is a force that manipulates the ego according to its basic weaknesses and strengths. It is an equally powerful ally of occult spiritual forces. Individuals involved in occult circles or sects risk their identity through the subservient role they play in acknowledging the value of a sectarian ideology. Only with great difficulty can they detach themselves from the powerful drawing force or egregor of sectarian consciousness that rules with the deep-seated conviction of a master of sorts, who can easily use circular arguments to reinforce the position of the sect's willful orientation. Any individual seeking an identity through a sect loses his own identity with time. The sect will support his weaknesses and turn them into false strengths and vice versa. Psychic seduction is the primary principle of any sectarian organization, and only a strong, uninfluenceable consciousness can break away from such a vampiric force that destroys personal identity in order to create a monopoly on thought. Spiritual naivety is the seed of psychic seduction. It increases as individual consciousness loses sight of itself as a primary value. Every aspect of a spiritual ideology seduces the ego. The very nature of spiritual consciousness in its occult form conditions the individual to a form of domination that binds it to an astralized will and consequently forces its behavior. Occult sciences, be they negative or positive, black or white, are spiritual in themselves. They seek to give access to parallel dimensions of self-reality, while subjecting the individual to rules or rituals that only condition him to a collective illusion. Through such rituals he gradually loses his identity and his capacity to deal objectively with forces that operate beyond his physical dimension, and are devious, unless opposed and then integrated through a well-developed center of gravity. The occult fascinates the human mind through its links with sources of energy which defy logic. Intuitive faculties are channels to the occult, since intuition is a form of intelligence that is not rational. The occult opens the mind to forces whose nature the individual does not yet know and fully understand. He is subject to interpretations that will suit the ego, but at the same time will gestate in a dynamics that will grow beyond his capacity to objectively control his own destiny. Seduction is born of ignorance and grows in proportion to a lack of self-identity. It is a symptom of the lack of conscious thought that leaves the mind at the mercy of forces that oppose any development towards inner identity. It prevents the real self from coming into the focus needed to allow the ego to understand its relationship with the universe of the mind. Man's mind has been seduced for so long that he no longer has any connection to his own reality and its underlying laws. His consciousness is more of a reactionary process to stimuli than the creative process of an integrated consciousness. He is seduced by the authority of temporal or spiritual ideologies that convey the impression of transcendence, while leading his mind into servility. Religions have seduced mankind and mystified reality beyond recognition and objective comprehension, while science has failed to compensate creatively in that it has negated and thus shut off man's psychic impulses, his communication with alternate realities. Access to the pure mind has been thwarted from time immemorial. Seduction is the legacy of a failure to see through the deception of socially sanctioned truths. It interferes with the development and growth of personal identity and real freedom that cannot be had until it is wrested away from unconsciousness. Seduction causes the ego to forsake reality and align itself with forces which rule in the name of ideals that use the sacred, the spiritual or the occult only to camouflage domination. Ideologies have seduced man up to the very end of the 20th century, molding his ways of thinking. He can no longer think by himself without some kind of outside support. As religious and temporal ideologies show more and more cracks in their monolithic block, he is turning to the occult that will turn out to be no less formidable a foe. Unless he learns to develop a lucid, highly critical faculty based on pure mind, the new century will force him to experience psychic and occult forces that will use him as a naive channel for the unknown. The occult is flourishing in the most industrialized nations. It is not necessarily the commonwealth of underdeveloped countries or civilizations, but in the most advanced societies of the world where this age-old science is becoming a preoccupation. The occult is spreading today in a growing variety of marginal spiritual sects and secret societies, and their many faces are captivating the imagination and subduing the minds of thousands while plunging the unsuspecting ego into a whirlpool of disadvantageous experience. The seduced easily become abductees through their own choice. Oblivious while their teachers forge on blindly or communicate naively with so-called sources of knowledge they cannot by themselves evaluate and objectively integrate. Those who seek sectarian adherence are in need of the identification that seduction promises. The material world of marketing has developed sophisticated techniques of seduction that enslave the masses in endless consumerism. On the occult level, many are seduced by mystic merchants and lose their identity in the process. As a result of this double onslaught on the human mind, mental illness is on the increase and the more advanced nations are burdened with a growing psychic deficit. Consumer marketing is a less threatening form of seduction than its psychic or occult counterpart. People who are seduced by the occult risk ending up on a life raft which may not take them where they wish to go on the basis of what they think they know. While occult sciences may relax the individual's rigid rational views on life and death, they may also instill in him hopes, the likes of which may never materialize, considering the illusions that have given them birth. Occult illusions are part of a cosmic game played by the astral world against man. The universe is a multi-dimensional reality in which human and astral interests are diametrically opposed. This is probably one of the most basic and yet most difficult lessons to learn for anyone interested in aspects of life that transcend the banalities of everyday existence. Seduction has immemorially worn the mask of truth. Not surprisingly, history has been one of seduction at all levels. In retrospect, one could say that the evolution of intelligence means learning not to be seduced. While involution is a historical process wherein seduction is total, evolution will reflect more and more freedom for humanity and man as an individual. Seduction has colored so much of human consciousness that were man to remain impervious to it, he would, by that fact alone, be intelligent in a conscious creative sense of the word. Psychic seduction is the most deceitful of all forms of seduction. It not only enthralls the ego but also alters the vibrations of the soul. Were man intelligent in a conscious sense of the word, his mind would be free from it absolutely. It would no longer be part of his mental or emotional experience. Seduction is an astral path to human consciousness that seeks to influence the ego until it loses its identity. Through seduction, the soul's astral life program leads to suffering. The higher mind is subjected to the power of the soul, and man loses his identity as an intelligent being. We have been seduced into thinking that free will is our real freedom. The illusion of free will has replaced real freedom in our mind. Millions of people throughout the underdeveloped world of the mind bring havoc into their lives because of the illusion of free will. The seductive forces at work in unconscious man are so powerful and active at this point in history that the political events that are now shaping the future will destroy world harmony and finally demonstrate the fundamental illusion of unconscious free will, which is a far cry from real conscious freedom. Evolution requires full consciousness of seductive forces at work in the world. Without it, human ingenuity is helpless before the onslaught that is capable of creating havoc on either a social or individual scale. The seductive process of unconscious life can only be arrested if we learn to identify the reality beyond thoughts and their power to magnetize us. Those who indulge in the study of occult sciences must understand that the nature of being cannot be grasped through any form of knowledge that has not been integrated into individualized consciousness. The fundamental process of psychic activity serves to teach us a lesson in the development of real intelligence. Unless we become profoundly aware of the seductive power of astral forces, we fail to relate to the inner core of our own being and mind, and we therefore fail to unify what seduction seeks to divide.